Hi, this is Jack Lawrence, and you're listening to Bluegrass Jam Along, the podcast for anyone and everyone who plays bluegrass music.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Bluegrass Jam Along. This episode is part of the Doc Watson 100th birthday celebration that I put out a couple of months ago. And I'm aware that those two episodes ended up being almost 5 hours long, and some people get put off by having to listen to 5 hours worth of stuff. But a lot of the stuff in there is great, and there's a couple of interviews in particular that I thought I might just separate out and put out on their own. And one is the one with Jack Lawrence, and one is the one with T. Michael Coleman. So I'm going to start with this one, which is the interview with Jack Lawrence. And I've just taken it out of the full episode and just going to present it here separately for those who'd really like to hear that but don't really want to listen to 5 hours worth of stuff. So what you're going to hear is an interview with Jack Lawrence about his time spent with Doc Watson. This is part of exactly the same version that appears in the Doc episodes. If you enjoy this and you haven't heard those, I'll put links in the show notes and do go and check them out. But if you just want to hear the interview with Jack, this is it. So, yeah, that's what's coming up, and I will put out the one with T. Michael next. So here you go. Here's my chat with Jack Lawrence.
Back in the late 70s, mid-70s, I met Merle Watson through my friend Joe Smothers, who I was doing. We had a rock and roll band, and we also did a folk music duo. And Joe and I did some opening acts for Doc and Merle and I became friends. In the fall of 1983, I got a phone call from Merle on a Friday afternoon, and he asked me, what are you doing tomorrow? And I said, well, I'm going to mow my grass tomorrow. It's Saturday, and I don't have anything else going on. And he said, well, why don't you go to Lake Charles, Illinois, and play a show with Dad? He just didn't really want to go. I don't think, for whatever reason. And so I did. And Merle kept calling me to fill in for him. And it's funny. The first show, I figured, okay, we'll do a little bit of rehearsal. But that never happened. I mean, I played with Doc for 27 years, and I can count on two fingers how many times we rehearsed. But anyway, it must have worked because, I ended up being there for 27 years. And the first year I played with Doc, I played about 50% of the shows through 1984. In 1985, I played probably 95% or even better because Merle was in the process of building Doc's house. And so he was clearing the property, and he was, working with the contractors and that sort of thing. So he didn't go out very much in 85. And of course, in October of 85, he was killed in the accident. And so something evidently worked because I stuck around for a long time. And the first 4 years or so of that, I was, T. Michael Coleman was part of the band. So, Michael and I became close during those 4 years, and it kept in touch and done a project here and there.
Yeah, and you'll get to play together again at the Doc 100 shows.
Right. And it's going to be great fun. We've only done one show, so we're still, kind of figuring out how to approach it, and that's been a work in progress for the last couple of months. So we're getting started up again at the Birchmere in Alexandria, where Doc and Michael as well we all played for years, 2 or 3 times a year for, 25 years or something. So that's going to be fun. I haven't played at the Birchmere in a couple of years. Michael and I did another Doc tribute show that was supposed to include Wayne Henderson, who canceled at the last minute, but we got our friend Dudley Connell from the Seldom Scene to come in and cover for Wayne. So, that was, and that was a hoot playing with Dudley. We had a good time with that. But I'm looking forward to taking this show back to the Birchmere.
Yeah, they're really cool. And so presumably when you started playing with Doc, you were really familiar with a lot of his music prior to that.
Yeah. In fact, that first show, there was no rehearsal. So he asked me just, 10 minutes before we were going on stage, well, do you know this song? Yeah, I know that one. How about this one? Yeah. And he named 3 songs maybe. And he said, well, okay, we'll do those 3 first and then go from there. And the show went well. And I was familiar with Doc because, from the time I was around 13 or 14, maybe in the mid 60s. I had some of his records. I had grown up listening and watching Flatt and Scruggs on TV. And my dad was a sound tech at a music hall, so I got to see Flatt and Scruggs live and Bill Monroe live and Porter Wagner, Dolly Parton, and Jerry Lee Lewis. I mean, everybody came through this music hall where I lived. And so, and my dad made sure to introduce me to all these people as they came through. And, when I was, 13, maybe 14, I discovered Doc, and I'd been trying to play like Earl Scruggs up to that point, fingerstyle. And, I actually got Doc's first solo record and was knocked over by it, and started working on the flat pick stuff. And, then I discovered Clarence White, and I did, through Doc. And then, Glenn Campbell was another huge influence for me. Not to mention, a couple other guitar players in the area here. I mean, Tony, I met Tony Rice when we met each other when he was 17 and I was about to turn 15. They moved back to North Carolina. I guess that would have been 1968 or so. And Tony was not as much an influence for me as he just was. He was just another one of the handful of flat pickers in this area. There were a couple of others, and we all competed against each other at fiddlers conventions and guitar contests and stuff from 68 until, well, really, Tony left in 1970 to do the Bluegrass Alliance thing, and then I left home about a year later and joined the Bluegrass Alliance after he left. So, but it was Doc that got me started on the flat pick thing. And, the On Stage record, when that came out, that was like my Bible for a couple of years. I listened to that over and over and over.
So, like, back at that first gig, once those 3 songs are gone, and you've kind of, you've gone through the 3 that you've arranged to play, it's just a case of Doc shouts out a song and then you're off. Oh,
yeah. Yeah. And it never mattered whether I knew the song or not. And that continued until, until the very end. Doc would just turn around to me and say, this is in G. And, I would say, yeah, I know G. And then he would start. and that, like I said, that continued until almost through the very last gig. And it took a couple of months for me to kind of settle into it. I was, I was concentrating more on playing as differently than Doc, more than I was actually playing the song. And it took me, and Doc never said anything one way or the other. He always let me play what I wanted to play when I wanted to play it. He encouraged that. But, I listened to a couple of early shows and realized I was a little outside the pocket. So I reined myself in. And as the years went on, and it didn't take years, but within a few months, we learned how to play with each other. It's not always easy when you got two guitars and both play lead, and Doc would never hear him doing it any other way. So it's amazing how little time it took for us to lock in together. I mean, especially with Coleman there, who was rock solid. I reined myself in a little bit, and as the years progressed, Doc started getting more adventurous because I kind of played by the seat of my pants. I'm from the put your fingers anywhere school of music, and, luckily it works most of the time. But I noticed Doc getting a little more adventurous in his solos. And after we'd been doing it a number of years, we did a show with Bluegrass Revival. And Bela Fleck came to me and gave me what I thought was a real compliment. I mean, he said, Doc plays better with you than anybody he's ever played with.
I mean, that's a compliment.
So I think, I took that as a real compliment. And, like I said, we rubbed off on each other. In fact, as the years went on, our arrangements just happened organically because Doc would call something we'd never played together, when we're on stage in front of, thousands of people sometimes. And so, after playing the song a few times, if it got into the rotation, after playing it a few times, I'd figure out like a little lick that I did in certain places, a little signature lick that I thought, fit the song. And on occasion, we'd be playing the song and I'd realize, Doc's playing my part. And so I have to figure out something else to do, which was, again, I take that as a real compliment. Doc was always very gracious with anybody who played with him, to let them have their moment in the sun. We'd have people come up and sit in with us over the course of the years, Sam Bush, David Greer, just Jerry Douglas, Mike Aldridge. I mean, everybody wanted to play with Doc for one thing. And we loved that. And so we'd have people sit in all the time. And after I'd been there just a couple of months, he asked me to start singing a few songs on the shows as well. So, I remember going into the recording studio and we had to tell Doc, hey, you're giving all you need to take your solos. You're giving them all away. I mean, this is a Doc Watson record. You're giving all the solos away. You need to play your solos. So but he just loved, especially the younger, people of my generation, which now we're the elders, kind of, but back when I started with him, which is approaching 40 years ago, he always hung out with younger musicians, for the most part. And I think that's what kept him vital, well into his 70s and to his 80s.
And that sort of point you were talking about, giving away his solos and being sort of very generous as a musician. And just, I was watching the other day one of the Homespun doc videos, which is the one that was filmed at Merlefest. And, another artist, you would buy their video and it's them showing you their stuff. But there's bits just going, right, let's go and look at what Jack's doing. Let's go and, deconstruct that break that Jack just played. And it's just a sort of generosity of, we're all making this music together, and so it's all interesting, which just is right. Not always the case.
Yeah, I didn't know I was even going to be part of that thing until late the night before, and it was at like 8:30 or 9 o'clock in the morning at a festival where of course I up late the night before, and so I look pretty ragged, but we played well.
Yeah, and it's a great video, and it's things like that. They give you real insight into, I think, the fact that we've got all these videos of players over the decades that Happy and Homespun and other companies have put out. It's just a wonderful document of some of those things, particularly when it's not in a studio, when it is at a festival setting, and there's a lot of chat as well.
Right. Yeah. There are a number of videos out there, starting with VHS, which nobody uses anymore, that I was a part of, with Doc. And one in particular was a set from Merlefest. I think it was 92. I'm not sure, but it was Doc, Tony Rice, Dan Crary, and Steve Kaufman, and it's just a guitar set, and that was also done at Merlefest. I think the year after the Homespun thing, but I'm not positive.
We'll be right back with you just after this. Bluegrass Jam Along is proud to be sponsored by Collings Guitars and Mandolins. If you're attending the NAMM show in January, stop by the Collings booth to say hello to the team, get hands-on with their selection of customised acoustics and electrics, and check out some exciting new prototypes they're working on for 2024. They'll also have a few of their world-class artists on hand demoing various instruments. And if you can't attend, don't forget to follow their Instagram and Facebook accounts throughout the show for photos, videos, and the latest news. Collings guitars are hand-built from the Sound Up in Austin, Texas. This episode is also brought to you by Peghead Nation, the home of roots music instruction. If one of your 2024 resolutions is to improve as a musician, Peghead Nation is the place to go. They have 65 streaming video courses for guitar, mandolin, banjo, fiddle, dobro, bass, and ukulele from some of the leading names in acoustic music. Courses cover bluegrass, old time, Irish music and swing, plus lessons dedicated to improvisation, theory and ear training. Your first course is just $20 a month, and you can add more for $10. Try any course free for a month with the promo code JAMALONG. Make 2024 a year of more music at pegheadnation.com. Yeah, it's great to have all that documented. And just sort of thinking about you touring with Doc, because obviously, you're talking about Doc never told you what to play, and he very much let you play in your own style, and you were very conscious of that. Because sort of touring with Doc, there's two sides to that. One is to play in the places that Merle had played with him, and Merle had his own very distinctive style as well. He wasn't just sitting there backing Doc up, but also just the amount of time you would be spending with Doc on the road as well. It's there's a musical relationship and a personal relationship there.
Oh, of course. I spent more time on the road with Doc than I did with my growing family for years. And sometimes it was hard. When Coleman was still with us that first 4 years, we could kind of split the responsibilities. We would fly and rent cars and to get to the gigs. And so, one of us would get Doc through security at the airport, and or pick up the bags while the other guy goes to get the rental car and that sort of thing. And after Coleman left the band in, I believe it was October of '87, it was just Doc and me on the road. So it was hard work. The 2 hours that we spent playing the show was the best part of the day. And also after Coleman left, I had to do all the driving because Doc drives too fast, and or that's always our joke. And as time progressed, Doc brought me in as a full partner. And even before that happened, I was also booking the flights, booking the rental cars and the hotels, and doing all the road manager stuff too. So eventually Doc brought me as a full partner, and compensated me for a lot of that extra work.
And it's any kind of touring situation where it's just a couple of you, it's a lot of time to spend with another person, and particularly over a span of quarter of a century. It's and the touring in those situations, 20 years older than you were when you started doing it, that kind of work affects you in different ways at different stages in your life, and it's a remarkable relationship.
There were very few times we had a crossword over that span. But there, just like a marriage, there are going to be times when you butt heads and, say stuff that you might not really mean, or some stuff that you really do mean. So, it was a lot, but that happened very, very seldom. We were pretty tight. We were pretty tight friends, and and that's I think Merle's trust in me really kind of, well, I don't know. Merle's trust in me rubbed off on Doc. Doc trusted me because he's, Merle did, and he trusted Merle.
Yeah.
And just prior to Merle's death, maybe 5 weeks or so, they were recording Doc's only bluegrass record, Riding the Midnight Train, the only bluegrass record he ever really did. And he called me one day and said, while we were recording it, and asked me to fly to Nashville and meet Doc and T. Michael and drive to a couple of gigs that were there after the recording session. And Merle called me that night. I just moved right into his hotel room after I got there. And about 1 o'clock in the morning or something like that, the phone rings, and it's Merle. And we talked for about an hour or so. And, he never really gave me any reasons, but, he told me during that conversation that he was going to step back from touring, and he was just kind of tired of the road and wanted to do something else. I mean, he was his happiest when he was organizing a construction crew or riding his tractor or clearing land. I mean, that's what he loved, doing that. But anyway, he said, I'm not going to be doing this very much longer. And I just want to know, you and Dad get along well and you play well together. I'm going to be stepping back, and, I just want to make sure that you're in and, you'll take care of Dad and everything. And I said, well, of course I will. I mean, I've been doing it for, almost 2 years at that point. So of course I will. And, that was the last time I ever spoke with Merle. I got a call about, I don't know, maybe a month later from T. Michael, telling me what had happened. And Merle was, had a real sense of humor about his place in the group. Those last couple of years, I'd been out there, especially the last year, 85, 84 through 85, really. I'd been out there most of the time. And so on the shows that Merle decided he was going to play, people would come up and tell him they were kind of surprised to see him because he hadn't been out for a while. And he'd just tell them, well, I'm filling in for Jack. So, he was, Merle, when he died, I think was maybe the happiest I'd seen him in a while. And, I think maybe being off the road was good for him.
Yeah, it doesn't suit everybody, and it's, as you say, there's a lot of responsibilities go with it. And
yeah, well, he'd been at this point, he'd been on the road at the point of his death. He'd been on the road with his father for 20 years, basically, and believe me, that's a long time. That's a long time to stay with one act, because up until I was with a dozen acts before I started playing with Doc. And, that just, the whole Doc thing just really clicked. I mean, I think the best either one of us ever played was when we played together.
And it's an interesting span of time to spend like in one musical situation, in just in terms of the arc of that as well. I'd be really interested to know if over the course of that 25 years, so like how Doc was perceived, because we look back on Doc now as this figure on the sort of Mount Rushmore of American acoustic music. And there's, post Will the Circle Be Unbroken, Doc was put in a whole new light by that. But there must have been a journey between those points where sometimes he was much more in the spotlight, and the acoustic music in general comes and goes in popularity, particularly through the 80s and 90s. It's
right. Well, actually, the Circle record saved Doc's career. I mean, in 1971, between the Circle record and the influx and the popularity of bluegrass festivals, which, in the early 70s was really starting to take off here, but the Circle record was that saved Doc and Merle's career, because I think they were kind of struggling a little before that. So that was a big shot in the arm for them. And then couple that, like I said, with the bluegrass festivals becoming hot. And, when I first started playing with Doc, we were playing dinky little clubs, and, what would happen, we'd get an anchor gig, a nice theater gig or something, then book clubs and stuff around that gig. And we did that for several years. And then around 1990, Doc decided he was going to retire. And so we didn't do anything for we played out the gigs we had, and then we didn't do anything for about 2 months or 3 months. I'd gotten involved with a guitar shop and doing some guitar repair and staying at home for the first time in years. And that lasted for about 3 months. And Doc called me and said, well, do you, I really want to go out and play some more, play again. And I just told him, I said, look, I feel good being home for the first time in years. I've gotten involved with this guitar shop thing that's just getting off the ground. I'm not sure I want to go out, And so he said, well, I understand. And we hung up. And about half an hour, 40 minutes later, he called me again and said, I can't do this without you. I really feel like I need to go out. And here's my proposition. I'm going to double the price or double the fee that we're normally getting, and only go out maybe 2 weekends a month, just a couple of days at a time. And so eventually, those fees did get doubled and tripled in some cases. He said, we'll just take the expenses off the top and split whatever's left. And, that was an offer I couldn't turn down. I mean, that was, it was very generous for one thing, but, I would have been crazy to turn that offer down. And given the relaxed schedule, I still could put in the time at the guitar shop, which, I did that for about 5 years and played with Doc at the same time until I got out of the guitar shop business.
And was there a point, around 2000 when Oh Brother just gave all forms of acoustic sort of bluegrass related music a shot in the arm? Was there a sudden sort of resurgence and interest for Doc's music after that? Because it's so easy for somebody like me who's got into bluegrass since then just to see all these things as always having been in the spotlight. But I know that things changed.
Yeah, well, I don't know how much Oh Brother. I know it was a big boost for bluegrass and string band music, really, because quite honestly, there was not a whole lot of bluegrass in Oh Brother, Where Art Thou?
Yeah.
Real bluegrass music. In fact, but it gave acoustic music in general a big shot in the arm, just like Bonnie and Clyde did in the 60s and Deliverance did in the 70s. All of those movies gave a little bit of boost to it, to the music. Acoustic and roots music, a lot of people don't realize that Doc never considered himself bluegrass, and he did not really like it much when people pigeonholed him as a bluegrass guy. He told me, he said, I've never been in a bluegrass band. I've only done one bluegrass record. I'm not a bluegrass artist, but he didn't take into consideration the impact his guitar playing had for guitar players in bluegrass bands. And, plus, the lines have been blurred about what is and isn't bluegrass for years.
Yeah.
But Doc was always, adamant that, I can play bluegrass, and I play, there's some of the stuff that I do that's, flavored like that, and certainly has those influences, but I'm not a bluegrass artist. And he finally came up with a term that just about everybody could understand. And basically he just would tell people, so, well, I play traditional plus. And they'd ask, well, what's that? He said, well, it's traditional music plus whatever the hell I want to play.
Yeah, and it's very true that Doc gets a lot. You have conversations about bluegrass guitarists, and Doc comes up as one of the, the biggest influences on people. But bluegrass is a specific format of a band with certain instruments and certain stylistic things, and so many things that get lumped in around that don't really fit that mold.
Right. Yeah, and that's what Doc. That's how Doc felt about it. So we don't have a mandolin and a banjo and a fiddle. We can't play bluegrass. I mean, he had his idea of what bluegrass is, and he wasn't it.
Yeah, totally. And I think it's, and there's something good about that. I think that whole idea of traditional plus and not fitting into predefined versions of what music has to be, just playing music that you like in the way that you like it. And that's Doc Watson. Doc Watson was sort of a genre to himself in many ways.
Yeah, I mean, people at first, Doc was a big fan of the Moody Blues. We did Nights in White Satin, and just recently I read a review. Doc and I never recorded it together. We played it all the time. He would go on and on about the Moody Blues and how he loved that song. And he had worn out an 8-track tape of that song, of that album. And so finally it came out on compact disc, and I bought it for him as a Christmas present or something. And the next time we went out on tour, he pulled out Nights in White Satin. And just recently, I don't know if it was on it was a review in Bluegrass Unlimited, I think, that mentioned, maybe it's on a compilation or a video or something, Doc's version of that. Well, it wasn't a video. I think it was the record he did with the Frosty Morn guys at Merle Fest. They recorded it then. And somebody, and recently there was a review of that song, and they wondered who talked Doc into playing that. They didn't like it at all. And, I came very close to writing a letter to the editor and saying, nobody twisted his arm to play that song. He loved that song. Yeah, I mean, you didn't tell Doc what to do very often. I mean, especially musically. You never told him what to do. And he afforded me the same thing. He never told me what to play or when to play. So, just go with it.
Oh, that's really cool. There's just the idea that anybody would twist Doc's arm. Anybody who is that certain about their own musical style and that comfortable with who they are and that sure of their own musical intent, the idea that you could convince them to do anything they didn't want to do seems almost laughable.
Yeah. Yeah, I've never, I had a little bit of a problem when I was young with band leaders that wanted me to play like a certain. Well, for one, Lonnie Pierce with the Bluegrass Alliance, they'd already had Dan Crary and they'd had Tony, and I was the next up, and Lonnie wanted to go back to the pre-Tony sound. He wanted me to play like Dan Crary, and I just said, I can't. I can't. Nobody can play just like somebody else. I can't do that. He said, "Why don't you learn band solos?" And I said, "Lonnie, if you had told me that before you hired me, when you offered me the job, I would have turned it down. I would have turned it down." And so, we kind of butted heads over that. And I was only 18 years old at the time. And even then, I was, was I influenced by Dan? Of course I was. His bluegrass guitar record was terrific. I would say that I was more influenced by Dan than Tony. For sure, much more. But I didn't want to be Dan. So I went through a succession of bands, before I got the thing with Doc, and it was just so refreshing at that point that, hey, here's a guy that's going to let me be me and decide, let me decide what I want to play, when I want to play it. I own the D18, Martin D18 that Doc used on a bunch of the Vanguard records, On Stage, Home Again, and the Flat and Scruggs Strictly Instrumental. He gave me that guitar, I don't know, 35 years ago. And the way I got it is pretty funny. At Christmas every year, the weekend before Christmas, Doc and I would play at a place in Johnson City, Tennessee, called the Down Home. And it was like our Christmas party. There we'd go over and play 2 shows, turn the house, do 2 shows, and did it the week before Christmas for 25 years. And I would go pick up Doc, drive across the mountain, and we'd do the shows, and I'd come back, usually driving with one eye closed. We would come back, and I would stay the night with Doc and Rosalie. So on those occasions, I would I'd go out in the kitchen and grab a cup of coffee and go down into Doc's music room. And I noticed in the corner behind his stereo cabinet this old beat-up guitar. And so I pulled it out of the corner, and I recognized it as the guitar I'd grown up listening to on his records. And so I dusted, this bridge was coming off of it, and it had 3 strings, and there was a half an inch of dust on it. So, I pulled it out, and I dusted it off, and I was plucking on those 2 or 3 strings, And then I took a big sniff of the sound hole. I'm a sound hole sniffer from way back. I love the smell of, the interior of acoustic guitars. And so about the time I took that sniff in the sound hole, Doc was standing in the door, and he said, "What on earth are you doing?" And I told him, "So, well, there's this, I found this guitar in the corner, I think it can be repaired. I think you can fix this up. There's still some music left in this old thing." So he said, "Well, maybe one of these days I'll give it to you." Well, it didn't happen that time. So this repeats itself for, I don't know, 3-4 years. Get up in the morning, get the coffee, go down and dust it, pluck the strings and sniff the sound hole. And Doc always said, "Well, one of these days I'll give it to you." So he finally did. He finally did one Christmas, and he said, "I just want the Grover Rotomatics tuning machines that are on there." And I said, "Well, give me your wrench and screwdriver. I'll take them off right away." So anyway, I got it home, and it was in worse shape than I imagined once I got a mirror inside. So anyway, it took me a couple of years piddling with it here and there to, doing all the repair work myself. Finally got it back together, and we were doing the Dear Old Southern Home and On Praying Ground records. We did both of those records in 5 days worth of sessions. Anyway, I got it back together, and I thought, this is going to be cool. I'm going to take this guitar. This guitar is going to be on a Doc Watson record again, only with me playing it. So anyway, we're setting up in the studio, and I didn't tell Doc I was bringing it. We're setting up in the studio, and I just laid it in his lap. And as soon as he grabbed the neck, he knew the guitar. And he strummed it and said, "Well, man, you were right. There is still some music left in this guitar. I can't believe it, that it's playable again." And he played on it for about 10 minutes and kept going on about what a good old friend that guitar had been to him, and how he just still loved the tone of that guitar and everything. And I could tell by the look on his face, he's thinking, "I should have fixed that thing. I should have fixed that guitar." And so he was strumming away, and I leaned over and whispered in his ear and said, "Yeah, maybe one of these days I'll give it to you."
Bluegrass Jam Along is proud to be sponsored by Collings Guitars and Mandolins, making some of the finest guitars and mandolins in the world since the 1970s. Visit collingsguitars.com and find out why.